The Nuggets get housed by the Wolves at Ball Arena, and the gas tank might be pretty close to empty. What does that mean for Denver? Can they still take the number one seed in the West? How concerning is it that they keep losing to really good West teams at home? All this and more on Locked On Nuggets.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a Saturday edition of Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast, part of the Locked On Network, your team every day. Thanks for joining us Monday through Friday, usually. Adam and I couldn't make a World's Finest happen on Wednesday, so I'm here with you on a Saturday to recap the debacle at Ball Arena on Friday night. So we'll go over everything that has to do with that game. We'll talk about the Wolves matchup, why it was tough, what it means in terms of how they're performing in the last couple of games, why they're struggling so much. Is the one seed still possible? How much should Denver fans be worried? All that and more on today's show. Glad to have you with us here on a Saturday. The chat is bumping. I can't believe you guys are hanging out with me on your Saturday. I appreciate it. Folks like Dr. Van the Strand, Irwin's hanging out here. Pedro is first to say hi. Josh Whittinger, lots of folks hanging out with us in the chat segment. You can check all that out at youtube.com/LockedOnNuggets. Best way for you to support the show. Sean McEwen says, longtime listener, first-time viewer. What's up, Sean? So glad to have you guys with us. If you're listening on podcast, make sure to leave us a 5-star review as well. On today's show, we will talk about everything that went on with the Denver Nuggets on Friday night, with the loss to the Minnesota Timberwolves in pretty convincing fashion. They got their tails kicked in. Like they got whooped. Reggie Jackson said they got our butts kicked, said that they got punked, all those types of things. So there's a lot to kind of dive into here. We'll break it all down on the show. Let's start right here. Okay. The Wolves are a tough matchup, and we'll talk about that last segment. Like I'll get into like why the Wolves are a tough matchup. The Wolves played extremely well in this game. This is one of the best games I've seen Minnesota play this season. I've watched a lot of Wolves games. This was a great game plan from them. It was a great execution of a game plan from them. It was a great performance by them. They didn't get like a monster effort from Anthony Edwards. They didn't get like a monster game from some random role player. Mike Conley was terrific in this one with 23 points, shot 5 of 6 from 3. That's a random role player, I guess. But this was more about their defense and what they were able to do. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the last segment. We're going to start right here. The Nuggets gas tank is on empty, and it's been on empty for a while. And that's been apparent. And when they started off, whatever they were after 10 games after All-Star, and they were talking about, like, we think we can get the 1 seed. Out of the break, Michael Malone was like, we got to get healthy. Like, that's our big priority right now is we got to make sure that we prioritize health. Like, seeding, sure, we'd love to have home court, but we got to know that we got to be healthy. The players, though, because they were winning, were like, no, like, we want the 1 seed. Like, no, because they thought that they could do both. It was a reasonable thing. They might have been able to do both. It might have been possible for them to do both. Win and get rest for guys, right? They tried to do this with the Memphis and the Portland game where they rested Nikola versus Portland, still got a win. They rested, now Jamal was genuinely hurt. We can tell that now. Jamal was out. They rested Aaron on the Monday game versus the Grizzlies, still got a win, right? But the problem is you started to see cracks in the facade, starting with the Utah game, which is the one that I circled as like, hey, this is probably going to be a close game. It wasn't. They won by double digits because this team is really freaking good. But they were up by 39, and it got down to 15 at one point. And that to me was like the first sign. I said it at the time, but also in retrospect of it's hard to play at that level for a long period of time. The next game is the Toronto Raptors game. They go into that game, and they're down double digits, and they have to storm back, right? We have a pattern now of what's been going on, which is that the Nuggets don't have the energy left in the tank for them to play 48 minutes. This has been like a thing with Malone. It's like Malone wants him to play great for 48 minutes. He wants him to prepare, play great for 48 minutes, win the game, you recover, you play 48 minutes. They do not have that left. And there's a lot of reasons for that we'll get into in the second segment about why they don't have it. I've got here in kind of a rundown the space shuttle analogy, and this is really important because this is what it feels like to me. If you've watched the movie Apollo 13, which is a really classic film that you should see, there's a real conversation about they only have so much fuel left in the tanks after there's a rupture in space for them to do a number of burns. They can do a number of burns of the Jets to course correct. And then they have to basically shoot around the moon, use its gravity, and return home. They only had so much fuel in the tank, so they have to do limited burns of their fuel. And the Nuggets are at a point where after the All-Star break, they burn the Jets. And they did this earlier in the season too. When it was early in the season and they had that really condensed schedule that Malone complained about every night, and it was nuts. They had all these games stacked up against each other. Malone and the team together made the decision of like, let's push through this. Because if we push through the hard part, we'll probably get clearance at the end. And they did. They're not going to fall to 4. The Nuggets are going to be a top 3 seed. The Clippers are too far back. They will not catch. Okay. But burning that took something out of them. I've talked about this before with Will Barton about how much he would play heavy minutes in November because somebody would get hurt. And then he would not have enough at the end because he had burned his Jets early in the season. The Nuggets burned their Jets on that stretch. They burned their Jets when they went on the road trip and they got the win at Boston. And they got all those really good wins. And, you know, they lost the Sixers game, but they won a bunch of really good games. They burned the Jets after All-Star. They had lost 3. Nikola comes in, sends a text message. It's go time. The team rallies up and they burn their Jets for these games. And if you're like, these are professional athletes, they should be able to burn their Jets for 48 minutes every single game for 82 games. You might be right, but there's a cost to it. You will just have diminishing returns. I don't think that the Nuggets didn't play. Okay, they didn't play hard last night, but I don't think it was like they just didn't care. Like, that's where I think this conversation goes off the rails, is when there's conversations after the game about, like, why don't they try? Like, this is not last year. Okay, last year, they took their foot off the pedal and were like, yeah, it doesn't matter. We got the 1 seed. Who cares? Boston lost twice in this week to Atlanta after they secured the 1 seed. Do you think that that's a coincidence? Do you think the Atlanta Hawks are better than the Boston Celtics? No. When you lock, there is a cost to that. But this is not that, right? And that's why everyone's frustrated, because it's like, yeah, but you're still battling for position. But the problem is, like, Denver knows, they are looking at the standings and they know that they're going to be top 3. And so they just don't have enough left. I think they honestly thought that if they burned early and they burned through this stretch, that they would have enough, and they just ran out of gas. And like, that's kind of the thing here. Like, that's the problem. Okay, is that they do not have enough left to carry them. That's why they lost to the Suns. That's like they lost to the Suns and Wolves. They lost to the Suns, Wolves, and Suns again, or Suns twice, and then the Wolves at home. That does not happen. That's not what this team is. Okay. But it's important to kind of put this in context, that when I tell you, like, look, if they were just not trying, if they were just, quote, lazy or whatever, I would come on the show and I would blast them. I've done it for years on the show, being like, they just didn't care enough. Like, that was a pitiful effort that they gave. I didn't see that last night. I saw a team that without Jamal Murray did not have enough. They do not have enough in the tank. Like, Michael Malone said Aaron Gordon is extremely banged up. He said that he was surprised that Nikola Jokic played. We'll talk about the decision to play Jokic all those minutes later. They are at the end, and they just need to get through this stretch. And when I was saying, like, they need to pull back, like, this is why I kept talking about them getting the 3 seed, is because you may not want it to be. It is a binary choice. Because I went in that locker room and I talked to the Minnesota Timberwolves, and I talked to Mike Conley. Like, I was in the scrum with Mike Conley, right? And I asked Mike about how important is it for you as a team that hasn't gone through a deep run to try and win as much as you can. He's like, it's so imperative. He's like, that team doesn't need to. Ant said the same thing. That team, Rudy said that. Rudy was like, they've been there. Like, they knew the deal tonight. NBA players know the deal, and they know the deal is that Denver's done this before. They don't have the same urgency. They can't have the same urgency. They played until June, had 2 months off, came back to work, have gone through the season. Okay. There's not enough left in the tank. And Minnesota has to stay hungry because they haven't done it. They got to get the 1 seed. They know that they can't go into Denver and win a game 1 and a game 7. They know that. So now they're pushing to the end. OKC is pushing to the end, and Denver doesn't have enough left in the tank. Now, does that mean that they can't get the 1 seed? No, they're just a game back. We'll talk about that. We'll hit some other topics. We'll talk about the decision about how many minutes Jokic played. We'll talk about all that and more on the other side here on Locked On Nuggets. Passion, drive, and patience, what brings home the winning trophy, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. We're also brought to you today by the Amazon Fire TV. Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. It offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. I watched Roadhouse last night on the Fire, and it was fire. It was actually, I really liked it. I'm not a fan of these remakes, but I thought Jake Gyllenhaal's interpretation of the character was really pretty awesome. It was fun. It was a stupid fun movie, and it was really fun to watch. Great picture too. The stunts were great. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or the college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us at Locked On. There's a Locked On channel on the Fire TV channels, and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channel lets you dive into all the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date on all the latest in the world of sports. March Madness, NBA, MLB, and lots more. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking videos as well. Check out the Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out the Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, just visit amazon.com/lockedon Fire TV. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Whew, chat's bumping. Chat is bumping here on a Saturday. So let's talk a little bit about this. Josh Whittinger says, Jaden McDaniels says he thinks they're better than the Nuggets. Why is he so delusional? Because if you don't, you're never going to win. You have no chance if you don't think you're better than that team. You have to believe it. You have to have irrational confidence. That's the only way you're going to win that game. So here's kind of some other stuff on this. A lot of questions about Jokic, where post-game, Malone says he's surprised that Jokic played. He had like a double wrap on the wrist. And then Jokic comes in and he plays to the end of the game. Malone left the bench unit in, and it got to 12 with like 7 minutes to go. Or it was 15, and they were within range. And then they got back to 18, and that's where I think Malone should have pulled the plug. I also want to stress this, okay? If Jokic is like, hey, I can't go back in, Malone's like, all right, cool, no problem. Done. Okay. Oftentimes players want to come back in for a variety of reasons. There's a variety of reasons why players want to come back into the game, including their competitors, and they feel like it's important to play. Like, that's just like a thing that they do, is like it's important for them to play. Jokic in particular, like, kind of talked about this, about how he doesn't want to sit, like he can play. And I asked him about the wrist first off after the game, and he said, honestly, it's just dealing with pain. He's like, I'm used to it at this point. Now, to me, that's like an indication of like what NBA players go through that we never talk about. Like, Jokic has pretty much been dealing with his wrist hurts for like 2 years. Like, just every game, every season, his wrist hurts, and he just like kind of lives with it. It gets worse, it gets better. All those kind of things are different. Tim Joseph says, has Jokic had an MRI on that wrist? It's been over a year with that injury on and off. Here's what I would tell you. They will never let me know that there's been an MRI. Their training staff is one of the most obstinate in the league. They just don't communicate at all. They don't feel like they should communicate anything. They only release information if they absolutely have to. And so, like, I've tried to ask things like, hey, if they had an MRI, and training staff or PR will be like, I'll ask. And then be like, yeah, they said that's none of your business. Like, it's just, that's like how it goes. Okay. So I would love to tell you that if he's had an MRI on that. I also would tell you that this is my inclination. This is not reporting. This is my inclination. I would tell you that, yes, he's probably had multiple MRIs on it to make sure that there's nothing structurally wrong. He hasn't torn anything. And it's likely found the same thing, which is just, it's inflamed. It's just a condition he has to deal with. He has back problems and he has wrist problems. Other players have knees, like Jamal, who's got the knee inflammation. I would tell you, like, not to panic here. I want to also be clear on this. Like, Jamal's like, okay, the pregame comments from Malone, I missed it because traffic was a nightmare yesterday. 3 wrecks on I-25. But I talked to Ryan Blackburn, who was there, and he posted this big long quote you can check out on Twitter. And like the quote to me reads like, if this was a playoff game, Jamal probably plays. But this is kind of thing is like, you got to get that swelling down. If that swelling gets worse, he will just miss more time. Okay. This is like, Jamal is genuinely hurt and genuinely needs a rest. And I probably think that Jamal wanted to play. He's going through his full pregame warmup. I think he probably wants to play, and the training staff is like, we got to get the swelling down before you play. And that's the right move. Like, it just is. Like, that's where it's at. Joker's able to play, he's not. And like, that's how it goes. Like, this is, I will say, like, there's a lot of like tearing up Jamal. Guys, this is the same knee that he had an ACL tear on. Like, he had surgery on this knee. What are we doing? Like, I am willing to criticize Jamal when he plays badly, and certainly I'm willing to criticize Jamal when he does various things in postgame. But like, Jamal was hurt. He apologized to Malone postgame. Malone was like, yeah, like Malone, like Jamal came to him and said he was sorry. Like, he apologized to him. That's like, no. Okay. And this is from somebody that did the whole like quack quack thing with Embiid, right? Which looks terrible in retrospect. But like, am I a believer that there are games that players can choose to play through? Yes. Was this one for him to do so? No. As much as it's like fans wanted to win this because it's like, we can get the 1 seed. I'm just going to stress it. You don't need it. You do not need it. The Wolves need it. The Thunder definitely need it. The Nuggets don't. And you have to consider that, and you have to take that into consideration. Jamal was unable to play. End period. End dot. I don't think that playing Jokic. Here's another thing I will say. Once you play, because like if you talk to players, they'll talk about like, look, this is what I have to do. I have to get to the arena. I get dressed. I go in. I do treatment, and treatment's like, that's 30 minutes of them working on you just to get you ready to go. Then you go through your warm up. You go through your entire warm up. You got to make sure all that feels right. Then you come back in. Then you go through game plan. Then you go back out. Then you do layup line. Like, there's a whole bunch of stuff that happens like 90 minutes prior to even playing, and then you compete, and then we all act like, why did he play 48 minutes instead of 40? Why did he play 35 minutes instead of 30? Ed, I'm just going to tell you, that doesn't matter. Once you go through that process, you've already put the wear and tear on them. So, like, genuinely, we overreact to minutes. Now, I'm not saying that there's not cost to like Tibbs playing guys 48 minutes or 42 minutes, let's say that. 42 minutes over 82 games. That's a problem. But this like one individual game, we don't need to freak out about. People freak out way too much about that. Jokic playing 30 versus 35 is not meaningful. You can go back to Jamal's injury and be like, why was he in that game at the end of the game when it wasn't competitive? I get it. I understand, right? You want to like, there's no outcome of this game. But that's also really common, and that could have occurred at any point in the game. We think about these things a little wrong, is kind of my point here I'm trying to get to. Now, I want to talk about this. The thing I would tell you is that the Wolves are a tough matchup. The Suns are a good team. The Nuggets have approached these games in the same way, which is like, it's honestly like the Raptors game. We can just screw around and not play hard, and then we'll just close out. This is why the clutch stuff gets you in trouble. When you lean on clutch performance, there are games you will not be within range. The Nuggets closed that game great. Like, that was, I was actually looked up and I was like, this is 12? Like, this could be 10. I was like, this is not outside of the possibility of like a random comeback, right? Like a few things go well, but they're doing that too much because they're not in a position to do so. Now, the difference is that in the playoffs, they showed us last year that when they got rest and they took the time that they needed, they came out in game 1 and they smacked Minnesota right out of the gate. Like, they let the entire league know they were coming from game 1. And that's what you want to see. And like, that's like what's really important to kind of happen here is like the Nuggets need to get this right going forward. And that's going to have to be the important part of this. We'll talk about the Minnesota matchup, and we'll talk a little bit more about what realistic expectations you can have for the remaining 8 games of the Nuggets season. Coming up next here on Locked On Nuggets. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventures could be around the next corner? Our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. The 2024 Nissan Rogue is perfect for city drives and great escapes. My wife's on one right now in a Rogue. Class exclusive, Google built-in as your always updating assistant to call on for almost anything. Gone are the days of connecting your phone, Google Assistant, Google Maps, and Google Play Store are built right into the 12.3-inch HD touchscreen infotainment system. The 2024 Nissan Rogue is the perfect midsize crossover for your next adventure. The 2024 Nissan Armada will change what you expect from a full-size SUV. Picture a rugged 4x4 that can seat up to 8 in first-class luxury and style. Tow bigger and explore further in the 2024 Armada. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop nissanusa.com. Back here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate you guys being with us and joining us here on a Saturday. Kane, who is clearly a Jokic fan and a Jokic fan only, should probably chill out just a little bit, because the problem is, like, players get hurt and players get tired, and the Nuggets didn't play well. And you know who also didn't play well last night? Nikola Jokic. His defense was awful. He missed a bunch of shots at the rim. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, I'll get to this. This is why the Reggie conversation was hilarious to me. So after the game, Malone goes, two guys I did appreciate the effort from was Christian Braun and Reggie Jackson. And everyone was like, Reggie Jackson! Reggie played hard last night. Reggie attacked the rim. Do you know what the problem was with him missing all those shots? Rudy Gobert's at the rim. And no one else was creating anything. I'm not sitting here saying that Reggie played well. Reggie played hard. That's the difference. And compared to the other guys on the roster, Reggie played harder than most of them, including Nikola Jokic. And, like, that's okay. Jokic is gassed. That's fine. I don't have a problem with that. And it's a tough matchup. Rudy Gobert's a monster. And that team is really great defensively. And one of the things I asked Reggie about, and he gave a really good answer post-game, is he gave this answer. I asked him, I was like, look, because he mentioned early on, he said, we know what Gobert is going to do, right? He roams the paint, and Malone talked about that. But the key here is that you can have Gobert roaming the paint and not be an elite defensive team. The thing is when you have a rim protector like that, what Minnesota's great at is directing traffic the right way. It's that they have length, and Reggie talked about this, where they have guys like Mike Conley that can be is a really great perimeter defender to be handsy on the perimeter and move you away from trying to get to the spots that you want to go to. So then you swing the ball, right? And they're able to sink and then recover to pick off passes, and you can see it, so you don't make them, and that's why everything gets stagnant. Now, Denver can counter all this. They are good enough to counter all this. We've seen that versus the Wolves before. They can counter all this, but it is a challenge. It's just important to kind of keep in mind here that what makes Minnesota great defensively, and that was a fantastic defensive performance by them last night, is that they challenge everything. They challenge pass, dribble, shot, everything. Nothing is easy for you. And if you're driving, they're going to drive you to the right side that Rudy's expecting, so he can help show, and that makes it hard to get a shot up. Okay, so then you back it out. Now you're against the clock. You always wind up in less than ideal situations because they are able to use their length, smarts, and physicality to play against your strength. Now, Denver didn't hit them last night. So Nuggets fans get pretty annoyed whenever I kind of compliment the other team. There are still other good teams in this league. And again, if the Nuggets executed their highest ability and they have Jamal, then things work a lot better, right? And they're able to challenge those things and get them going. Like, this was not like this was not a performance where it's like the Wolves have all the answers for Denver, but it is a matchup where you need to respect the fact that Minnesota is going to give them a fight. This isn't going to be 5 again. It's not going to be 5. It might be 6. Game 6 is very often the swing. But I'm just here to tell you that team legitimately can do things in this. Kane says, which team in the NBA has less NBA players on their roster? Most of them, Kane. This roster is really great. They won a championship. So now there is a real sense here that from Denver that, like, yeah, they're really good. But they know what they're going to do. I also want to tell you about the Wolves. There was like nothing but respect for them after that game. Like, the Jaden McDaniels "we're a better team" quote is like, he wants to, like, again, rational confidence. Ant was like, yeah, Jamal was out and I was mad about it because he wants to compete against Jamal. He wants to beat them straight up. Like they're great teams that want to compete. Ant said it like a million times. They're a great team. That's a great team over there. Rudy said literally he was inspired by Denver's run last year. Mike Conley was like, they do so many things well. It really, he's like, that's why we're so proud of this performance that we had. And like, they know that Denver just didn't have the energy. They knew that. And they're still like, that's how tough it is to beat them, is that they're on like half a tank. And we still had to play that well in order to beat them by double digits. That's a really big problem. Steph the One says, how come every bench abuses the Nuggets since the dawn of Malone? That's actually not true. The Monte Morris, Mason Plumlee bench was fine. It did totally okay relative to the starters. It was totally fine. It was totally okay. Do you want to know why? Because the Nuggets have $500 million in salaries in their starting unit. Do you know what that means? That means that you do not have a lot of money on your bench. That's what happens when you have a great starting unit. I want to note that as well. I've talked about this consistently. And when I talked about they need to start resting guys, this is the big, and look, the stat keeps getting worse and it's important. I'm telling you, the stat matters. The Nuggets are 6-10 versus teams over 500 when one of the starters is out. They're 6-10. Compare that to their dominance in all of the other games. Do the math. 6-10. They can win a series if one of the starters goes out. They can, but it's going to be tough. This is my big thing for you. The Nuggets are going to be fine, guys. They really are. Just like when they were 15-2 and everyone was laughing at me for saying they would finish third, and they may not. They may finish first. It's going to be really close because the Nuggets have won a bunch of coin flip games. Okay. But just like I told you, like everyone thought I was crazy when I was downplaying them when they were 15-2, they're going to be fine. This stretch is not who they are. They're just in a bad spot, but they got to get healthy. And that means they're going to, in my opinion, they got to give up on the one. You got to give up on the one. If you get it, great. Maybe you win the games with Jokic or Murray or Gordon or KCP or MPJ sitting, but you got to start getting guys real rest. And I mean like days. You have to get them significant rest over the last 2 weeks of the season. Minnesota has clinched tiebreaker thanks to division record. Oklahoma City has a 3-1 head-to-head tiebreaker advantage. The Nuggets are going to lose almost any tiebreaker situation that involves those two teams. They now lose all of them. They will lose all tiebreaker scenarios that involve those two teams, head-to-head, 2-team or 3-team. It's done. And like, that doesn't mean you can't pass them. You can. But is it worth the cost? You have to burn the Jets again. It's not worth it. It's time. Like, you tried. You made a really good effort. You're going to win a ton of games. The Wolves and the Thunder are going to win more. That doesn't mean they're better. It just means that it's time to give up that dream and start focusing on what's important, and that's getting ready for the playoffs. Like, that's what's important here. All right, that's it for Kane. I'll just say this. I wouldn't say that this is like embarrassing. I've been around for some embarrassing performances by Denver. Losing the 2018 playoff spot, that was embarrassing, right? But there's just been, I think, a real sense here of the expectations got too high. Don't get too high, don't get too low. You're going to be fine. Again, the Nuggets still have the most championship equity. They're going to be okay. Do you remember last March? I want to ask everybody this. Do you remember last March when I was like, boy, I don't know. Like they're really playing bad. I went against every instinct that I have. I'm not falling for it this year. The Nuggets are going to be fine. They're going to get healthy and they're going to put in better efforts. They are trying to manage the season. That's what this becomes after you win a championship. The regular season is something to manage. Now, I'll also say this. I don't think, like Ryan Blackburn and I were talking about this last night, the numbers for the starters are better. Very slightly, or they were. I think they still are because Jamal's been out. The defense is better. They're a better team because there are more ways that they can win. They don't have to have a 128 offensive rating to win a game anymore. They can win with defense. That's how good their defense has been when it's been locked in. Okay. But again, when I've talked about this all year, it's going to be harder. This is what I'm trying to prepare you for. You should feel very confident and be like, I have the best team. We have the best player. We are the reigning champs. We're going to win the title again. What you should not be is this is going to be a cakewalk. We're going to crush everybody. Nobody can beat us. I think the Nuggets are going to trail in a series. This is going to be a hard playoff run. It's going to be tough because there are a lot of really good teams. Right now, it's the Dallas Mavericks in 6th, and after that win last night, they are very much more likely to finish 6th than they were before it. I've got them projected to finish 6th, a half game behind the Pelicans. Basically tiebreaker. Okay. Luka Doncic, that team, that offense, Kyrie's ability to put pressure, that's going to be a really tough matchup. The Nuggets can win. They can win that game. They can win that series. But it's gonna be tough. This is all I'm really kind of trying to say here. Finally, I do think that, like, look, I just think we need to really be realistic about the fact that the bench got worse. It's not a numbers thing. It's not a numbers thing. It's more of a feel. It's that I think it's a lot to ask for Peyton Watson and Christian Brown to make huge plays against great teams. Bruce Brown could make huge plays versus great teams, and Bruce needs to be respected for that contribution to a title team. But that's a big difference here. So I do think that this is part of the conversation. Steph says, point that I'm trying to make is the same one Malone made last night. I don't mind the Nuggets losing, but the fight has to be there. Wolves aren't a good half-court offense, yet they toyed with the Nuggets. That's true. Do you want to know who the biggest problem there was? It was Nikola Jokic. That was the biggest problem last night defensively. I don't think AG was good. Anthony Edwards cooked him, but guess what? Anthony Edwards is really good. Ant cooked KCP. KCP is really good. Ant's really good. Okay. But they're contained. Once they get into rotation, they don't have the energy to make the rotations that they need to right now. Again, if they have more in the tank, this is not how this looks. I am telling you, as a guy that has covered the league for 17 years. God, I can't believe that. 17 years I've been covering this league. I that is not a we don't care loss. It is a we don't have it in us, and they need to get rested. And, like, look, guys are still gonna have to play, right? They got to go out there on Sunday versus the Cavaliers in a 1:30 game on Easter Sunday, and they got to play that game. They got to play the Spurs. They got to get these. They got to get these games. Now, I do think that it'd be probably a good idea to give up the ghost on the Cavaliers game. Teams don't like to rest guys in home games. They want to give the fans their players, but I do think it's probably time to start pedaling back, guys. It's time. Settle into a 3-6. Now, look, again, there's a good chance that if it's OKC in the 2 seed, would you be shocked if they got upset in the 2-7? I think OKC is really good. Last night was a huge win for them versus the Suns without SGA. But would it surprise you if the Suns in the 7 seed or the Kings, or it's unlikely the Lakers get there, the Mavericks, if any of those teams were to upset the Thunder, and then all of a sudden the Nuggets have home court for the second round anyway? That's entirely possible. This is why I don't necessarily think the 1 seed is all that important to them. Big Honey says we don't have long losing streaks. It's true. You don't have long winning streaks or long losing streaks. So Tim Joseph, also Reggie. Conley cooked Reggie. Yeah, I mean, look, a lot of Mike was Reggie's having to make rotations for help and then kind of trying to get back under cover. And Reggie got cooked individually a bunch. Like, Blackburn was like blowing up at me about this play where Ant blows by Reggie. Yeah, and Anthony Edwards is better than Reggie Jackson. That's true. I'm not. The big thing I'm trying to stress on you here is that not that Reggie Jackson played well. He didn't. No one played well. It's that Reggie Jackson. Fans tend to do this where they just isolate one player and they just single out in on him, and it's especially if it's like everyone loves MPJ and Jokic, so they never get the criticism. Reggie's the difference, right? That thing. Reggie should be a backup point guard. He shouldn't be having to start. And, like, look, you can blame the roster construction. Do I think they should have added another point guard? Yeah. I think they should have added another point guard, another guard, or another center. I don't think that they needed the guys that they did. But this is what they chose to do. And so now also, the other thing I would tell you is with this roster construct, you kind of have to accept it. Like, you can complain. It's a fan's right to complain, but you got to be like, there's nobody else. Because I forgot to mention this, and this is a very big one. I don't want to hear any more about the no point guard lineups ever again. Get it out of here. Get out. Get out of here with your no point guard lineups. Those things died last night. They were worse than the Reggie minutes considerably. You got like constructed, organized offense with Reggie Jackson. They can't generate stuff even with Jokic on the floor when they don't have a point guard. Get it out. It's time. You're gonna have a ball handler on the floor. Live with that. That's something you're gonna have to live with. It's done. All right. One more. AB says, Matt, how is it unlikely the Lakers are 1.5 behind Sac, Kings tumbling, and just lost Malik and Herter? Because they can't get to 7. You have to jump 2 teams, not just 1. Kings have 3-1 tiebreaker over the Lakers. The Suns, the Lakers have tiebreaker over. They can get that one. They might be able to get the 8, but getting 7 is tough. Now, if you want to say like the Lakers sneak past the Suns into the 8, and then they beat the Kings in the 7-8, okay. A lot of stuff has to go right by that. Also, by the way, they lost to the Indiana Pacers last night. This Lakers team is not consistent. That's who they've been. So I'm just telling you, like, we tend to think these things are easier than they are. All right, it's going to do it for Locked On Nuggets for Saturday. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me. I want to stress to you, you're going to be fine. The Nuggets are still very much they should be the favorite to win the NBA title. Don't get overly concerned about this. It is going to be okay. The road's going to be hard. Prepare yourself for that. But don't lose faith. This Denver Nuggets team is good enough, more than good enough, to win a second straight championship. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you guys again tomorrow night for World's Finest on Sunday night after the Cavaliers game. Appreciate you guys being with us. We'll see you guys again next time on Locked On Nuggets.